Hello everybody, it's Ophelia Dragon here from Atomic Monsters. I have a video for you. I've been working on testing out Painter now that it's unbanned, and I put together a Llawan Painter deck. I have to apologize ahead of time. I actually am struggling with a nasty cold, and am so full of a mixture of my own prescription drugs plus drugs for my cold and stuff. I'm so full of uppers and downers that if I stood inside of a hotel lobby, people would try and get inside of me, which would just be awkward. And I played a game testing this deck last night that I felt was really particularly worth sharing, even though it's using an older version of the deck. It was one of the more interesting, and it was very grueling deck games that I've played in a long time. And so I'm actually going to use the replay feature to replay that game for you guys and walk through it rather than stream a new game, because I really just want to go over that game again myself too. Making some changes to this deck after this moment. Uh, I was testing Winter's Rest because I have Merit Lage's Slumber, and I've been testing Merit Lage's Slumber, and I thought maybe I might need an extra snow trigger. And I'm really enjoying the Merit Lage's Slumber, but I really don't need the Winter's Rest. In fact, it'll come up in my hand this game, and I'll be like, no. And I'm doing an even swap for that for Endless Atlas. And I've decided that I was testing multiple different combos and lines of play in here as well. I decided that Isochron Scepter Dramatic Reversal is also not where I want to be. And also in all my testing, never really had a chance for Cephalid Illusionist and Lightning Greaves came up at all. However, I thought it would be worth testing because I was already going to run the Greaves anyways, and I can tutor for the Illusionist with Muddle the Mixture, and it would allow me to set off a win with Lab Maniac. But it's just too much extra, and I wanted to add some more like draw and counter into the deck. So what we're putting in instead is Endless Atlas, which I think is really good. 2 mana artifact, two and tap to draw a card. Most of the time is going to just work. So I thought I'd test that out now. Adding a remand because there's a lot of times where I felt like I could use an extra versatile counter. Slipping the mental misstep in. These would have actually, both of these would have been in the deck in the first place if I'd already centered on what my clear win condition and where I wanted the B was going to be. But I took them out to test the other options. So now I'm putting them back in, and I've decided that there's just way too many things at 3 mana that I'm always wanting to search for and hoping to draw, especially in this last game. So I've added a Drift of Phantasms just to act as a tutor for everything under the 3 mana slot, including Blue Sun Zenith and Whir of Invention. Because now this can find us. There's times when I want back to basics and I can't find it. There's times when I have a Windfall or a Time Twister and I don't have Narset or vice versa, and I can't find it. It lets me get Shackles, uh, even Fabricate to get like a 2 or 4 mana artifact or whatever. There's just so much reach. A little bit about what this deck does is there's built-in synergy between Llawan and Painter. Already, there's a lot of creatures in the format. In fact, a lot of like really popular generals that are blue, and Llawan alone will just lock them out. It is actually pretty strong. You just need a way to protect her. And with Painter, we'll literally wipe everything. And if you can also find Grindstone, you can use it to either one-shot take one person out of the game, or you can use it on yourself with Lab Maniac or Jace. And the rest of the deck is really just built around finding your pieces and controlling the game. And it works out pretty good. There were times when I felt like I needed either some extra card draw or some extra counters. I apologize if I wind up coughing in anyone's ear while I'm going through this. Like I said, I've got a cold. I will try to pull the the mic away. I can't. The mute on this is in an awkward position. I can't just hit it. So I apologize ahead of time. Some of the other things in here, mostly basic lands. The only non-basics other than fetch lands are scrying sheets, a myriad landscape, gemstone cavern, and an ancient tomb. And this is mainly there for the early game and filtering and such. Then you just slap down a back to basics and it'll lock out a lot of decks. Good mixture of card filtering and draw. A lot of it pretty self-explanatory. I have, as some extra things I'm testing, I have an Archmage's Charm, which I'm finding works pretty decent. I don't usually like 3 mana counter spells, but this one also has other modes that are really relevant. The draw 2 card is good. Taking people's soul rings or their Mystic Remoras and such is also really good. And having it as a counter spell, I think this is like potentially the cryptic command of Commander, where cryptic command itself is not that great. Usually this might be the cryptic command of the format. I've also got a Narset in here to work with the counter card draw, also to work with Windfall and Time Twister, which the Drift of Phantasms will help me find. And Kira is extra backup to help protect Llawan, just to protect my stuff. And a Theta, just simply because I'm testing her to see if she's good disruption against combo pieces in other people's decks, or worth finding soul rings and stuff. And she's a flex spot. If anything's going to get cut from this deck in later playthroughs and builds, it'd probably be one of these two. But I want to see how the rest of this stuff does first. Now, the replay function on Magic Online sometimes gets buggy, but I think the thing that usually breaks replays is when they update the client, so Wednesdays usually, whereas they may change some aspect or code in the game that can cause the actual replay to break when it tries to play back again. I think that's what the problem is. I tested this replay a few turns in and it seemed fine, but we will see. I'll just flip back over to it. Here we go. I won the die roll. And I choose to go first. Alright, so we're facing against Narset. Now, Fetaboka is playing more of a Jeskai value control game as opposed to a true traditional Narset deck. They're not trying to combo into anything off of Narset other than just extra value, which they point out at one point. Animar is a pretty decent Animar build. They actually specifically point out later because I was streaming that they joined with one of their better decks. And this Sliver Hive is interesting. I'm not even sure why they're running Sliver Hive Lord, because it's literally just, I feel it's just there so they have access to all 5 mana, but they've got a weird assortment of cards. Not a bad deck, but not something you usually see in competitive, but probably stronger than most of the casual decks that I run into. And it all winds up being a really, really fun game, because all of us are packing heavy control and trying to combo off and try multiple times. Anyways, let's take a look at my opening hand. I look at this and I decide that this is good because I got a preordain first turn and a copy artifact for any potential soul rings or mana crypts that come out. There's the Winter's Rest I was talking about, which winds up being just like, I didn't think it was going to be good, but I thought it was worth testing in case I needed that extra trigger. At worst case, I could pitch it to Force of Will, but ultimately I decide that no, it's just not worth it. It's and even the times when I cast it to tap something down, I wish that it's something else. But it's worth like looking at this. 2 mana to as long as you have another snow permanent, which is easy when you have snow islands. It just taps it down and doesn't untap. For 2 mana seems okay, but it ultimately just doesn't wind up being worth it. Um, so that becomes the Atlas, was it? Anyways, let's go. And I keep this hand. And I draw a landscape, so I don't preordain first turn. Instead, I play the Myriad Landscape to ramp me out. Anybody who hasn't just sat through a replay before, it records every single step, even the seemingly invisible steps. So sometimes it can take a while to play through stuff, but this was a 3-hour game, so this is probably going to be faster than the original playthrough was. So I decided to drop down the Merit Lage's Slumber here to get scrying. Which I find is actually pretty useful in a 2-mana enchantment. It's good for filtering through your deck. I decided to keep the island. You see he returns his Polluted Delta with Noxious Revival. Down comes Animar. This I don't agree with. I mean, sometimes I do this. I'll tap out just to make sure I can yield. When I've done nothing, but you're facing against 3 blue players. You want to keep up at least the seeming apparent ability to counter stuff. I usually only do this myself if I have to go AFK for a second. You'd want to be able to look like you're presenting something. Plus, it's a format where stuff like back to basics and stasis exist. I think I put this island to the bottom. Yeah. I expect him to do a lot more this turn than just play Wild Cantor, but it's all he does. Obviously keeping up a counter, I guess. And this is interesting. This is why I say this is a weird deck. Orlando is definitely a pretty decent player, and there's a lot of good stuff in this deck. But running out turn 3 Heartbeat of Spring when there's an Animar and a Narset is really sketchy. And here I get 2 islands and I get to scry twice, which is really nice. I keep the Gilded Drake. I keep the Sway so that I could potentially use it with my commander. I preordain to draw the Sway. I put the top on the bottom. First thing I do is I try to steal Animar, test for counters. Now I try to put my commander through. Which gets mana drained. Now, one thing I was contemplating at this point was whether or not I should Sway of Illusions. But I choose instead to try and counter with Archmage Charm. Swaying could draw me into, like, potentially a better counter. But, I decided it's better to try and counter this mana drain rather than gamble on it. And because, of course, because there's a heartbeat, there's a lot of extra mana for this Logic Knot that just kind of wrecks me. Of course, now they have extra mana for Narset. And I worry about Narset plus Lightning Greaves here, or something like that. Here I was wondering if they were trying to discard an Anger. Otherwise I would have probably used the Izzet Charm first to see where I was going. But I was thinking maybe they were trying to see if they needed to save it as a mana leak in case there was a Force of Will coming from anyone. Of course, we now have a Drake battle. I'm a little bit leery of leaving a naked, unprotected, unhasted Narset. See, Fitaboka is talking about how their deck is not a typical combo Narset, more value. We get a Kranos and a Relic. I get a Scry off that island. I put the bauble to the bottom, even though it'd be nice to have the mana. I decide it's better to stick it to the bottom and try and find something better. I got a lot of mana thanks to the heartbeat anyways. Oh, this is the turn I thought about using a Sway. That's right. Because I was going to Sway of Illusion all the non-blue stuff. What I should have done is tried to find a counter with Sway of Illusion by turning the Arbor Elf blue. And I just kind of like brain fart on that play and I don't do it. I pass priority by accident. So I copy the Mana Crypt and I Time Twister. Which prompts a Rift on the Kranos. And the Rift gets mana drained by Irlando. Hey viewer, I'm replaying a game to make a YouTube video out of it. Just so everybody knows, I actually use Twitch for recording videos at the moment because it's just easy. Until I get like a better understanding of like other video software and such and recording software, I just find it a lot easier for recording videos. So sometimes I also get people chatting at me in my Twitch chat. I'm not sure who is there though. Hello. Then I try to imprison in the moon the Animar, which gets leaked. Now here I block, which I actually probably shouldn't have. I think I was thinking more of I just don't want Animar bouncing the Gilded Drake. But I'm probably better off trying to block the Animar in case it comes at me. Off of her, or their Narset, they get Search for Ensconsa and a Fabricate. Transmute the Tolarian West for a Cavern. This is actually a pretty sweet turn. Gets a Neoform, which is a really sweet card. I'd actually switched to the collection tab while this was happening, and I didn't see this happen. I was already at that point deciding to take the ice enchantment out and swap it, and I was doing that at the moment. We get one of our another exchange of counters. Disallowing the trigger from the statue. There's comments asking about whether I was streaming or not. And I was like, I'm streaming this. Always bring your good stuff. I'm testing Painter Llawan. And of course, this is because I sacked the I blocked with the Gilded Drake against Narset. Now I don't have the Gilded Drake to block Animar. I actually play pretty loose a lot of times this game. I was already kind of loopy on cough medicine at the time. Here we get a Blatant Thievery, which takes Merit Lage, the Search, and Animar. Yeah, see, this is where I was confused because I'd stepped out and I come back and I see there's a statue. I didn't see that exchange of counters. first thing I do is I preordain. Take a look. I put 2 cards on the bottom. Still not needing extra ramp at the moment with that heartbeat out. I want to find more proactive answers and get ahead rather than just building mana. So I slap down Llawan, which will just wipe out the Gilded Drake, the Animar, and Narset. And the board gets wiped. Now this is interesting. Countering the weird harvest, but well, it's the days. That's correct, true. I'm actually excited to see days. And this Remora gets a lot of value. I just want to, as an aside, talk about Mana Crypt and coin flips in general. No matter what you do with a coin flip, there's no pattern. It's not like if you flip up 3 heads in a row, you should pick tails, and because tails should come up. No, it's literally 50-50 each time. It's just the way statistics work. So you should always just pick whichever you prefer, heads or tails, and then for the rest of your Magic career, just always pick that. Saves you an extra, even though it's such a tiny decision, it saves you just that extra little bit of brain fatigue over the course of multiple games. I used to try and game the coin flips by picking based on how many of whatever flips I had. That was ages ago, before I had a firm grasp of how statistics work. It's one of those instances where it's waiting for each little tiny thing in the server. So there's like a whole bunch of... Or is it frozen? I hope you're not frozen. Are you frozen? Oh, the playback froze. Let's see if I can restart it. I'll let it play through until it gets to that point, see if it just stops again. This is definitely the more casual of decks here, even though he's running some really non-casual stuff. One of the interesting things about his deck is stuff in there that most people would frown upon in regular casual settings, but it's clearly got a lot of really casual, weird stuff in it. I actually really like Merit Lage's Slumber. I'm going to keep testing it because I think it might actually be good, pretty good. 2 mana scry off of basically landfall is pretty decent. And then the fact that it can late game turn into a win condition is relevant. The fact that every time I've played it, people count as a threat right away is actually pretty telling as well. It's funny because AHD here had actually forgotten that Narset has hexproof, and the reason I blocked actually was because I had forgotten that it had first strike. I always forget Narset has first strike. Excuse me. Yeah, I really should have swayed. That would have been the right play. In fact, I probably should have copied the mana crypt first, and then cast Llawan. That would have been better sequencing. Yeah, I totally should not have blocked here. See, they're setting up with to keep their Narset uncounterable and to find their haste enabler, which is a pretty good idea. They're recognizing this game's going to go on for a bit. I actually hope I run into AHD again and Fetaboka. They're both really fun to play against. And I want to see more of Irlando's decks to see what they're doing. This is just a very weird deck, but not not necessarily bad, just weird. And I'll spoil it. There is a, in case this fails again anyways. The thing that pops up is they play Catastrophe, which is the type of card that most people in casual tend to frown on. Mass land destruction. They use it to like lay down a planeswalker, make some creatures, tokens with it, and then blow up all the lands. They try to anyways, but it just felt like a really weird place for clearly such a casual hot mess of cards to be running. We're getting close to the point where it froze last time. I may just use the autoplay and just pause it when I need to instead of trying to click through it if it works. That may work better. Nope, froze again. Irlando's commenting on a song that's playing on my stream. No, not frozen. People are just talking a lot. It's not frozen yet. Yeah, I think it's frozen. Anyways, we start getting into a point where there's a lot of long counter wars back and forth, back and forth. We're wasting resources, drawing cards, wasting resources, drawing cards. Orlando gets a Rhystic Study out, I believe, next turn. I eventually, there's a point where I search, this might even be the turn, there's a point where search shows a Mystical Tutor on top of my deck, and I decide that, no, I mean, that will set up a good next turn, but because the way everybody's tapped right now, I decide it's better to try and find something better. This was like my window, I felt, and I think this is the turn. So I put the Mystical Study in the trash instead, and in top deck Jace, uh, which I felt was better because it's a card advantage, and part of my one of my win conditions, and draws me some cards, and I find Blue Sun Zenith, and then managed. I have a turn where I'm like, do I Blue Sun Zenith for like 10, which resolves, which is really weird to me, because they did have counters later, and I was like, do I try to win with what I have in my hand because I technically could, or um, do I set up for the next turn? And instead, what I do is I actually have setups for more than one. Oh, look, it's still actually going. It's just slow. I try to set up Scepter, Dramatic Reversal, and that gets removed. But then win pretty quick after with the Painter combo. Targeting myself. Yeah, the game itself's not playing, just the chat. This has happened to me before. But that's basically how the game goes through. AHD, uh, obviously getting kind of fatigued, winds up voting to exile his own Mox Diamond. So both the Mox Diamond and a Humility that Orlando plays gets exiled with it instead of just the Humility. Orlando tutors up Planeswalker, makes some tokens, and then tries to Catastrophe, and that gets countered. There's a huge counter war. We get these really brutal exchanges of counters stack going across the entire screen. It's great. Almost every turn there was a huge exchange of counters, and it made the entire game take about 3 hours. But I think there's some potential for this deck. I'm actually going to close up this replay and go back to the deck tech. I think this will work a lot better now, though, specifically because I now have the Drift of Phantasms to find my pieces. Karn's in here specifically because Blue doesn't have a lot of ways to deal with artifacts, and he's pretty solid at doing that. Plus, I can use my steal effects to take other people's artifacts by turning them into creatures, so I can then use something like Legacy's Allure, Drake, or Shackles to take it. And again, if there's anything I was going to change here, the next things I'm looking at is on the chopping block are these two. I haven't had a chance to really test them, though. They literally have not come up. I have not drawn them, or if I have, I was already going other directions in the game. So it's possible that these are just wrong, and they should become some more interaction, draw, or counters, or answers. But as it is, I'm pretty happy with the rest of this. I hope to see some good work from Endless Atlas. And anybody likes the comment or the content here, leave some comments below. Hate the deck, talk about that. You have other tests with Painter or with Llawan, other things you'd like to see go in this deck, suggestions, etc. There's also links below to make sure you subscribe. You can also follow my Twitch below. Plus, we're a vintage toy and game store, and I use my Twitch for all the vintage gaming. EDH being the only vintage gaming I sadly have the ability to stream at the moment until I get better set up for like video games. But there's also the link to the store below, or you can help me out on Patreon. But I hope to see some comments below. See you all next time.